Nirvedo, Krishya, Mirgim, Mataram, Purna, Bhagavat, Chetram, Upasama, Sila, Muni, Gana, Daitam, Salagramaha, Palastya, Pulalastramam, Kalam Jarat, Pachya Jagadama, Etam Eva Gunu Niro, Nishtra Guna Niratam Purna, Bhagavat Chitram Pasya Sila, Muni Gana Dayatyam, Salagramam Palastya, Palastramam, Kalam Rityat, Pachiranagam, Eti Evam Purna Nitro, Nistrai Nugunumayat Purna, Bhagavat Kesra Pusana Sila, Muni Gana Diyatyam, Salagramam Palastya, Palastramam, Kalam Jarat, Padastyagamam. Anybody want to try it? What's a different one on the board? Oh, okay, so we'll just go ahead. Iti, thus, evam, in this way, nirguda, hidden, nirveda, completely unattached to material activities. Vishraja, giving up, nirgim, the deer, mataram, its mother, punaha, again, Bhagavat Chitram, the place where the Supreme Lord is worshipped. Upasam Shila, completely detached from all material activities. Muni Guna Devitam, which is dear to the great saintly residents. Salagramam, the village known as Salagram. Palastya Pulaya Dishwaram, to the ashram conducted by the such great sages of Palastya and Pulaha. Kalajarat, from the Kalajara mountain, where he had taken his birth in the womb of a deer. Pratyagamam, he came back. Translation purport by His Divine Grace H.G.BhaktiSiddhanta Prabhu SB. Although Bharat Maharaj received the body of a deer, by constant repentance, he became completely detached from all material things. He did not disclose these things to anyone, but he left his mother deer in a place known as Kalajara Mountain, where he was born. He again went to the forest of Salagram and to the ashram of Pulastya and Pulaha. Please repeat. Although Bharat Maharaj received the body of a deer, by constant repentance, he became completely detached from all material things. He did not disclose these things to anyone, but he left his mother deer in a place known as Kalajar Mountain, where he was born. He again went to the forest of Shalagram and to the ashram of Pulastya and Pulaha. Purport. It is significant that Maharaj Bharat, by the grace of Vasudeva, remembered his past life. He did not waste a moment. He returned to Pulastya ashram to the village known as Salagram. Association is very meaningful. Therefore, ISKCON tries to perfect one who enters the society. The members of the society should always remember that the society is not a free hotel, but the members should be very careful to execute their spiritual duties to that whoever comes with will automatically become a devotee and will be able to return back to Godhead in this very life. Although Bharat Maharaj acquired the body of a deer, he again left his hearth and home. In this case, the mountain Kalajara. No one should be captivated by the birthplace and family. One should take shelter of the association of devotees and cultivate Krishna consciousness. So it's significant here that in this body of a deer, he's maintaining his remembrance of his past life. So if you can imagine taking this deer body and thinking about what you were in your last life and how important you were, your command of the whole world. You were like, a king. As King Bharat, he had nothing but opulence, and he had everything. And he gave it up. And he gave up the family. He gave up everything that he had. It became a renounced order, and so just surrendered everything and just put his time in meditation on the Supreme Lord, and ultimately became very close to pure devotional service. To remember that, and then to start taking this association with, a lowly creature as a deer, and the whole thing just turned around. Now, we hear these stories, and why is there so much attention given to it? And why? Because of a deer. And how important really is that? Well, the attachments in the material world are really strong. And I'm going to reflect a little bit on my own past. And here in the next chapter, when he takes his new body, Judd Bharat is like a fully realized soul. He's taken no more chances. So in this next life, he wants to make sure it's done really, without any hitches, any problems. So he becomes a madman. It's just wandering without any kind of, maintaining his own body. It's understood that he was like he didn't wash or bathe in his Brahmin thread. He was a Brahmin, initiated by his father, who was a very, very strong Brahmin. So, but he didn't, Brahmin thread was black. And so he didn't maintain himself and didn't want the regular principles. When his father tried to introduce him to spiritual life, he already had it. He was already pure devotee. So these functions about sacred thread and the duties of a Brahmin, his father observed all of that and the regular principles, but he was already way beyond his family, his brothers. He had one sister, and so beyond all of that, he's already in this perfect state, but he doesn't tell anybody. So he encloses himself and he sets his boundaries around so that he doesn't have anybody disturbing his meditation and concentration on the Lord. Okay, now that's good advice for anybody who wants to maintain Krishna consciousness, to somehow set boundaries. You make yourself in a situation where you have good association, and that association is spirit lifting, so it brings you up to a higher level in Krishna consciousness. Now in our society, Prabhupada set up this whole function that ultimately in Krishna consciousness, in every ISKCON temple around the world, it's meant to be an oasis, not a free hotel like he's saying here. We don't come here just to eat and sleep and enjoy, our material senses. We come here to be advancing in spiritual life. It's a halfway house. It means you're halfway to the spiritual world. So in this part of our time, we're here to perfect ourselves and each other. It's meant that we help one another, as given here, and in the next sloka. I'll read the next one also, because it wraps up the whole story. Let me read it. So this is the next sloka, and he ends the chapter. Returning in that ashram, the great king, Bharat Maharaj, was now very careful not to fall victim to bad association. Without disclosing his past to anyone, he remained in that ashram and ate dry leaves only. He was not exactly alone, for he had the association of the Supersoul. This way he waited for death in the body of a deer. Bathing in that holy place, he finally gave up that body. So it doesn't say much about what he did in the deer body. He was just very quietly maintaining himself and keeping it to himself. It says he didn't talk to anyone. How can he talk in a deer body? And when he said goodbye to his mother, how would he do that? I mean, it may be that he spoke, it could be spoken understood, but he didn't do that. So holy places like Vrindavan, Hardwar, Prayag, Jagannath Puri are especially meant for the execution of devotional service. Vrindavan especially is the most exalted and preferred holy place for Vaishnava devotees of Lord Krishna, who are aspiring to return back to Godhead, the Vaikuntha planets. There are many devotees in Vrindavan who regularly bathe in the Jamuna, and this cleanses all the contamination of the material world. By constantly chanting and hearing the holy names and pastimes of the Supreme Lord, one certainly becomes purified, becomes fit candidate for liberation. However, if one purposely falls victim to sense gratification, it has to be punished, at least one lifetime, like Bharat Maharaj. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta Purport, 5th canto, 8th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled A Description of the Character of Bharat Maharaj. So, as it runs out, he gives up the body and ultimately takes birth in a Brahmin family and becomes Jat Bharat. So, but in the deer body, now, I think everybody has attachments to some animal, some way or other. In America and most parts of the world, dogs are very favorable, and they're man's best friend. Right now, there's a week in, I think, Cambodia, one of these countries. It's called the Dog Week. So this week, they're killing all the dogs and they're eating dog flesh. So if you're hungry and you want to go to this festival that's going on right now in Cambodia. And so they kill all the dogs. There's no dogs left after this festival. And so this is the way it is in the material world. There are certain things that take place, and I open up my computer when I'm working to get online, and the news comes in. So some funny things are happening. So right now, the summer solstice, this is the longest day of the year. It just happened. That means I'm born on the shortest day, December 21st. This is the longest day. The summer solstice means a time for meditation and spiritual upliftment. So in Times Square in New York City, one of the most busy places in the world, there's thousands of people doing yoga, meditation, and sitting there meditating on the void. Ultimately, they can meditate on nothing a long time. But how good is that meditation? And so in any case, they're doing that. And there's a case of a couple who've been washed overboard on their boat and treading water for 14 hours, like half a day, treading water just to stay alive, and got rescued. And so crazy things like that are going on in the material world. And so the whole purpose of life, be it material or spiritual life, is to get out of this material existence altogether. And so how to do that? Become a devotee. Okay, now here we are in the assembly of devotees, and our purpose is to help one another advance spiritually. And this place, as an oasis, is meant to bring people into the society, encourage them, uplift them, and bring them into a higher state of self-realization. Now, the temple should be providing maximum facility. Not only the prasadam is nice, everything is nice, excellent deity worship. We're nice kirtan, 24-hour kirtan is going on. We're fulfilling the obligation. But devotees are being thrown out. You know, I understand it's very hard to get a letter of recommendation now. The visa problems are going on. It's becoming more difficult to remain in Vrindavan just because of, foreign registration office and what happens in a normal course of being in India. Okay, that goes on. It's always been there. But the temple should help and give facility and not throw anybody out. Another thing about temple maintenance is that in every department, and I hear rumors of how much cheating goes on. And it goes on here, it goes on everywhere. But one thing that you can't digest is Prabhupada blood. So any money that comes into this temple, the hundi, you have to be very careful. People counting that hundi, the money coming in, should not be used in any way except for temple purposes, to advance certainly the spiritual life of everybody, prasad distribution, and the deity worship, primarily. But they should be watched so that you don't, if anybody takes anything, it's like taking Prabhupada's blood. One story, way back, Prabhupada was on his terrace in Mayapur, and some devotee sannyas is going out the front gate. And Prabhupada yells and says, stop that devotee. And so one friend of mine, Tapamoya, ran all the way up to the front gate and grabbed the guy and stopped him and grabbed a hold of his briefcase, and it popped open and was full of $100 bills. So if the warning goes out that anybody who takes money, I mean, it used to be when you go out in Sankirtan and you sell books and you bring the money back and the big scores were going up, how much you gave, it was an upliftment, and everybody gave 100%. Now, I had a friend, I wanted to engage him, do book distribution. He said, how much is in it for me? What's it for me? So 10% for Krishna, 90% for me? 50%? Okay, 60% for Christian, and I'll take 40. It's not complete. Give completely everything. And brahmacharis having bank accounts. Now, you go across the bank, and it's all about bank, and you'll find there's a whole bunch of brahmacharis with bank accounts. Now, that's crazy. What brahmachari has the right to have a bank account? So it's rasabas. Brahmachari means you give up, you're surrendered, and you have everything in facility here. Why would you keep a bank account? Now, Prabhupada, in his own time, he set a standard that ultimately no money in a bank, first off, for the whole society. Half goes into book distribution, promoting books, the rest in building temples, and you keep no extra money in any bank, otherwise it accumulates problems. Taxes, dacoits, it accumulates people who are going to try to rip it off. So in Vrindavan, as most of the world, are expert rip-off artists. I've been cheated by just about everybody that came along in everything I tried to do. And 3 people died from being, expert cheaters. So no matter how much you cheat, you can't get away with it in Krishna consciousness. So this is a warning that goes out to all brahmacharis and anybody else within our society who touches money. Because ultimately, there's where the problem starts, is that we're here to advance spiritually, not materially. So if you got a bank account, you better get rid of it right away, man. Just dissolve it. And just live according to what Krishna gives. And so that's a standard for our society, and that's the way to be free. I just gave up a big ashram. I had a place in Vrindavan given to me as big as Krishna Balaram Temple. I gave it up. 3 people died down there prematurely. One guy hung himself. And there was so much tantra and so much nonsense attached and dispute in the property. So when I got rid of it, I was just like, all of a sudden, the sky opened up and there was light. There was suddenly, there was like a much lighter view on things because the attachments. This is what it's all about. Now, if you get attached to an animal, attachments will come. There's no doubt. I mean, you got to be attached to deity worship. You got to be attached to Prashadam. Be attached to Vrindavan. Be attached to everything spiritual. Be attached to association. Be attached to everything that's beneficial for your spiritual life. But don't be attached to things that aren't. I'm going to go back now several years before I was a devotee, and I had a big dog, St. Bernards. Everybody know what a St. Bernard is? It's like a small horse. It's a very big dog, and this dog, they're very friendly, they're very jovial and happy, but they're huge. And so I had one, and I became so attached to that dog that I call him Michelangelo because he was my favorite people at that time. So I was an art student and living the life of a madman. Now, I'm going to make a parallel between myself and what goes on in Bhagavatam. So Bharat Maharaj, Jad Bharat, became a madman because he didn't want to associate with people who were in the material world. His brothers, his family, everybody, friends, everybody just stood detached. Okay, when I was 3 years old, I tried to escape and run away from home. I didn't talk for the first 4 years of my life. I just couldn't understand where I was. Why I was in this body? Who are these people that identified as my parents? So I didn't prescribe to the whole system given to the people in society. I mean, you get married, you have a family, you set up your whole system in a very early part of life. Who I graduated from high school with, they got married immediately after high school, and that negated any possibility of flexibility and expand the horizon. In other words, if you get married, set up your family situation, that's it. One of my friends was a laborer for 50 years working in a factory. My father kept saying, get some seniority, get a job, work in a factory, get a family, do all those things, get married. No, Father, no, I can't do it. I didn't get married until I was very old. I didn't take a job. Finally, I went to art school. I wanted to be an artist. This was something in my heart. Then I decided maybe I'll be an actor and I'll be famous, and that got into very difficult situations in Hollywood. Okay, so I became an artist. went to one of the toughest schools in the world. Jishu Gornitai Ki Jai, Krishna Balaram, Radha Shama Sandalita Vishaka Ki Jai. I'm telling this story because it affected me in a way that I couldn't understand why people were attached to their job, their family, the whole thing. It was a joke. I kind of saw this whole world as a ludicrous situation. That why do people do what they do, you know? And they get drunk and they all this intoxication and everything that I saw was all part of me. Now in high school it wasn't bad enough. I never talked to ladies. I was very shy as a student. And then but there was bad association even in high school. And then when I got out of high school, I went in the Navy, and it was like just jumping out of a pan of fire. Really bad association. And so in the Navy, American Navy, it's just one straight line, straight to hell. So it's association. Now when we come to devotional life, you give up all those things. You give up your dog, your family, your friends, and your society is tempered so that, you know, as devotees we can understand one another. And then we have 4 regular principles. Okay, no meat eating. But if you I gave a feast for my relatives the last time I was back in my hometown. And I had hamburgers and sausage and the hot dogs. It was all tofu. So there was no meat. But I have a whole menu of everything that was looking like meat. I mean, Italian sausage, they're really good. And so this tofu gluten substitute is exactly like that. So I have a whole big feast, and it was like, you know, everybody enjoyed it. Then at the end I said, well, there was no meat. Oh, yeah. Now they understood that there was something lacking, but they had no idea. So basically, how do we suffer from not eating meat? If you want to scramble eggs, you take haldi or turmeric and you add that with tofu or paneer and mix it with butter and fry it. You get scrambled eggs. Take a steak sandwich as tofu. There's every way and you want the taste of fish and meat, you take cauliflower pakoras. So Prabhupada's given, you know, the recipe for enjoying within the movement. And so we don't suffer that way. Gambling, we gamble, and we're going to be devotees and we're going to make it back home, back to Godhead. So intoxication, who's not intoxicated in Krishna consciousness? We're all intoxicated. Ultimately, the greatest sense gratification is being a devotee, because you're constantly intoxicated on the holy name, and if you're not, you should be. And so the intoxication spreads throughout one's whole entire life, so it becomes more intoxicating. And finally, you get to a point where there's nothing material, it's all spiritual, and you run on spiritual energy. I should have died maybe 20 years ago, but you run on spiritual energy. Krishna takes care of your body. As you're doing service, then ultimately you get an access to like good health just because you need it in order to be performing devotional life. Okay, and so sex life is allowed in marriage, so you have that covered. So really we don't give anything up. It's basically a change of menu. And so that the menu that we prescribe to is helping us in every way possible to make it back home, back to Godhead. Now, once he lands into the next body of Jad Bharat, and we'll hear more in this next chapter. So then, his position as a madman, he didn't care. Whatever happened to him, whatever came along, whatever food was given, he'd eat it, you know. And so, ultimately, he was captured by these dacoits, and as we know, the story goes on. But in this body of no attachment, he had clean vision. And so Sukadeva Goswami and many great sages, they lived that kind of a life. So just wandering without any aim in life, but actually, you know, a covering which separates them from the material world. So we have that. We have in our association a wonderful opportunity to grow spiritually, because everything else is shattered. Material life is pushed away. Now, unfortunately, you walk outside, you got a different world. Vrindavan is changing. And so there's a lot of corruption and crime and so much stuff going on. But ultimately, we're not hampered by that. My wife had a dream once. It was very significant. I mentioned it before, but So she was wandering in the Himalayas, and it's a very steep, huge mountain cliff, and there's just a small ledge. And so she's walking along with her friends. They're following her. And so they have to jump over a little break in the pathway. But finally they find a crevice and they walk inside, and here it is, Shangri-La. Shangri-La means a place where there's no death. It means permanent youth. So they get down into the Shangri-La town and they find out it's a Hare Krishna devotee temple. It's an ISKCON temple in the Himalayan mountains, buried away, where there's nobody. But here in this place, there's eternal youth. Now, think about this. And so, in the Harinam, Kirtan is going on, and everybody's jumping and happy and dancing, like here. And so, suddenly she sees her mother and father. So she goes over to them, and it was such a struggle for her and her friends to get to this place. But then when she sees them, she says, well, how did you get here, Mom and Dad? They said, well, we parked our car in front and walked in the front door. Now, some people come to our movement, walk in the door, and there's no problem. They just come in, sit down, and they're a devotee. Now, it makes it very easy that way, but it also very easy to leave. You come in, it's easy, you can walk out easy. But if it's hard to get in, it's hard to get out. So because you don't want to go out, because you know outside there's nothing that can be, can help your spiritual life. So we in this oasis, this place where spiritual life thrives, is like the best place in the entire world, the universe. Of course, we understand from what Prabhupada tells us that demigods come here, wait in line to take birth within our ISKCON society. And devotees here who are like, this happened some time back, that one of Brijvasi people was criticizing, saying that if you're fortunate in your next life, you'll be Brijvasi. So Prabhupada was told that, and he said, well, you tell that person, if he's fortunate enough, in his next life, he'll be born in ISKCON. So to be in the society, to be born as a devotee is the greatest benediction, because ultimately your spiritual life is set up from birth. And so to be born in India is the greatest birth. Brings another story, that in San Francisco in '75, during the Rath Yatra Festival, there was a function in this club, an Indian club, and they sponsored a feast for the devotees. So we all went, and Prabhupada was there, and he was on stage, and he started speaking. Now, in that assembly, this is after the feast, everybody was satisfied, and the women were in the front talking and screaming, the kids were running out of control. And in the back were all the men talking and keeping on a heavy conversation. So the whole sound of the rumor of the hallway was just this tumultuous roar of sound and vibration and screaming with the kids. And there was Prabhupada trying to give a class. So he was saying that he was warning, or he was giving instruction to all the Indians in that assembly that, okay, you're born in India, you have the most pious birth as possible in the material world. Okay, preserve that. Don't lose it. Don't give up your birthright. Don't be caught and swayed by the dollar bill. Now, in America, the Indians who leave here and go there or anywhere else in Europe or any of the more prosperous countries, they give up sometimes all their spiritual attributes. They start eating meat. They get intoxicated, and they start taking on by bad association, they lose their heritage. Okay, Prabhupada was warning everybody about that. Then, just as he said that about don't be swayed by the dollar bill. In other words, don't get caught up in the material realm. And so as soon as he said it, this guy who was in charge of the group came up with a garland of dollar bills and placed it over his head. And so there's insult to injury. And so Prabhupada was shooting tears out of his eyes, and from here to where you are, and it was bathing the devotees in the front row. So Prabhupada was so affected by that unfortunately, and then I understood why he went to America. Because if India was like this, and he had no facility and no ability to make anybody Krishna conscious, because everybody was giving it up. So he had to make a new movement. He had to go to a whole different realm in order to preach and to save the world. And so on one occasion, Rameshwar Maharaj at the time, they were on the roof of the big skyscraper on 55th Street in New York. He was asking Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, what is your plan for conquering the world? And Prabhupada sat back, thought for a moment, and said, I can't tell you. So, in other words, we weren't ready, and that was the summation of what that conversation was, because ultimately the plan is there to take over the world. And Prabhupada predicted it. It's going to happen. It'll happen maybe in part of our lifetimes, or those who are younger, they see it all. That ultimately it's going to be a way that the world will change, become very Krishna conscious. And so he kept asking questions. And Rameshwar, more than anybody, any devotee, he was primed up. On one morning walk I went on, he had all the questions in his head. He was ready to, and he delivered them. He had no fear. He'd give Prabhupada one after another, and Prabhupada would answer all these very important questions. And my wife also, she had questions about Tulsi. I told her, you write it down and you send a letter to Prabhupada so you get yes or no answers. And so she got that back, and it was like a very instructing letter on how to handle Tulsi and how to do worship. So Prabhupada answered all the questions. And so, you know, there are different times that very important messages were given, and about the progression of Krishna consciousness in the world was being predicted by Prabhupada. That ultimately there will come a time when the world will go straight to hell and start throwing bombs, and there'll be a lot of chaos. But ultimately, through that, people will start realizing spiritual life again, become more serious when they see death. So ultimately, they become susceptible and vulnerable to whatever is happening in society, where the economic failure takes place. They'll come by countless thousands to our farms and ask for shelter. There'll be people coming from all over the world and taking shelter within our farm communities. And there, they will be given Krishna consciousness. So they give a certain amount of work, you do work, be fed, clothed, and completely engaged in Krishna consciousness. And this will turn the whole thing. The tide will turn. And ultimately, the world will change because of the mechanism built into this chanting of the holy name. So this is very powerful medicine for changing the world. And he said also we'll be involved in politics. It's a dirty business. We started that in Prabhupada's time, but he pulled people out because it was so dirty, that ultimately the most dirty people are those who are in politics. In any case, across the board, we have examples here in Bhagavatam that we should be learning from. And the fact that he took this deer body, is the fact that we should not be attached to anything material. If you possess a house, your house possesses you. And if you got a dog on a leash, the dog has got you on a leash. They can turn it around. Any kind of attachment you have in the material world is an attachment to the material world. So be very careful in what you accumulate. Now, grihastas by Shri means accumulation and perpetuation, so it starts to build up around you. And ultimately, whether you like it or not, accumulation takes place. So it's good to move once in a while. Then you see how much has to be moved. There was one lady, we call her Kutamata, because she had 12 or 15 dogs in her apartment, puppies. And she moved from our building to somewhere else. And so it took 15 bullock carts of loading the stuff she had in that one room. So accumulation is inevitable, but don't accumulate more than a couple dhotis. You know, you want a brahmachari, a couple bead bags. And so, you know, be simple, keep it very simple. And that's a thing called KISS in America. Keep it simple, stupid, means KISS. So it means as simple as we can make our life, the better it is. The more simple and the less we have, the happier you are. I had one friend who came to me as a young artist, and he said, I want to be what you are, what you have. You can draw anything out of your head, just start drawing and you got it. So I told him, well, it takes 50 years to get there. And he said, you want to be what I am, I want to be what you are. You got nothing, you got no responsibility, you have no financial obligations, you're not married, you're beginning your life as an artist, you have everything going in your favor. And you want to be what I am? Accumulating, knowledge, okay. But to be, taking up responsibility and go through material life, getting married, having a family, all that is binding very strongly to the material world. Nothing more strong than attachment to the family. So like he gives up the mother dear. Now how does he talk to his mother dear? My dear mother dear, I'm leaving now, I'm going to the forest. I'm going to be with the sages. I can't be in this dear family situation. I'm renouncing my dear body. Now he does that. So can you imagine, he was able to speak, apparently, because in that deer body, he didn't say anything to anybody, and just eating dry leaves. But it meant he was in the hermitage, but he wasn't associating so much closely with the, like, devotees. Like here, Kamrupa's got some deer in his Goshala, these Neo-Gai. There's nothing more affectionate than a very small deer, or a dog, or anything small is very attaching. And so, whatever it is, small, even a small rat, kind of cute looking thing, just give it up. Anything attachment, if you're attached to your watch, give it away. Prabhupada had so many watches. And there's a story of this Haridas in Bombay. He was in jail, and so he saw a picture, and he got it back to Godhead in jail. So in the picture he saw Prabhupada with his big watch. So the first thing he thought, well, I'm going to get that watch. And so it turns out he spent a little more time in jail than when he got out. He went right to the address of Juhu, and Prabhupada happened to be somewhere else. So he goes to Allahabad, Hyderabad, and there was Prabhupada giving classes. So he sat right there in front of Prabhupada, and Prabhupada could see this young kid who was like a criminal. And he told him to come to his room after. He says, why are you here? Well, I want to steal your watch. So Prabhupada took the watch off and gave it to him. He says, no, I don't want it. Now he had turned around, so he thought, well, now I've heard what this movement is all about, and I'd like to be a devotee. But he says, okay, you become a devotee. So he initiated him. He's in Bombay, Haridas. He's one of the few people not stealing now. He used to be a thief. So in the temple, there's a lot of corruption going on. Anyway, it's just this warning that goes out to everybody within our society. Don't take anything that doesn't belong to you, because ultimately it's Prabhupada's blood. His own godbrother was cooking here in the guest house, and so Prabhupada is up on his room looking down. He saw his godbrother go out, concealing some sugar and some things, flour. He told him, fire him immediately, send him out. Because ultimately it's not good for your spiritual life to steal or take anything. There's some people who are called kleptomaniacs. They have to steal. It's in their blood. They can't do anything about it. They have to steal. They get off on it. So just as a warning, we don't have to take anything. Krishna's given everything. If you have anything, you don't. If you don't have everything, then ultimately Krishna will give it, whether you like it or not. So the best thing is have no desire. Be very careful about what you desire, because if you get it, it may be not the right thing. One friend of mine was in front of Radharani and begging for this. He wanted to marry this girl, and so he kept begging for that facility, that the girl would marry him. So it kept going on, and she wouldn't accept him. So finally she did, and he's never stopped suffering since then. So you got to be careful what you ask for. Don't ask for anything except pure devotional service, and you're okay. So it's a razor's edge. From here to our time of leaving this body, it's just a straight line. Keep it packed solid with Krishna consciousness. Every moment is very important, being Krishna conscious. So we heard that so many times. But if we're attending class, we're in the ashram, we're associating with devotees, we're fine. Don't leave. One of my friends, he was offered sannyas early in London, and somehow it didn't happen, but he came here. And he was here for some time, and he decided to go back to London. And I was sitting talking to him, and I said, Prabhu, it's not easy to get here. It's harder to come back. So, you sure you want to leave? He said, well, I got to go back. So he goes back to London, he gets involved in drugs, he gets locked up in jail, he hangs himself in jail. So, be very careful. I mean, devotees have spent time in jail. Sananta Shanti was here, before he died, and so I became a close friend with him. And he wasn't particularly interested in the registration of his visa and the FRO situation. You got to be 12 days. You have to register. He didn't do that, so he's way overstayed on his visa, and they found out about it. So he goes to jail. Now he's in the Mathura jail, and he spent 5.5 years in jails in Russia as the first Prabhupada, the only Prabhupada disciple, and the first devotee in Russia. So in those 5.5 years, he was subjected to all kinds of punishment, drugs, torture. Even the janitors tortured him, and they were just like, they wouldn't let him clean. 20 people in a room, in a cell. He gets to jail here. I go there, and I told the warden who this devotee is, how important he is in our movement. So he released immediately. And on the way back in the taxi, he says, "What kind of karma have I got?" He says, "I'm in jail 5.5 years in Russia, and I come here, I put thrown in jail." But he has to be, and he's like the saint of Russia, because he single-handedly started the whole movement, which is spreading like wildfire. Now, in our society, we're preaching, and whatever way we do preach, ultimately there's a residual effect. We get mercy, and you give it to the world. And so the more we give, the more mercy you receive. And he did a big thing, so his samadhi is here. We were walking together over in the Goshala, and we walked right on that land where the samadhis are. And we're talking about it, and about leaving your body, who knows when it's going to happen, so he already left. So our time is short, class is short, but ultimately the whole idea to keep remembering and keep in mind always is that we are gifted with a precious commodity called Krishna consciousness, and how we handle that, and how we savor it, and how we perfect it, and what we do with it. I mean, you got the greatest knowledge, and now with the ability to do things and to communicate in the world is coming up, and scientifically, there are advances, but the science, but now they're also understanding that the Big Bang Theory didn't happen. So some scientists are saying that the cosmic creation didn't take place in one shot. It took some time. They're looking at gases that they investigated in the Antarctic, and they're finding a whole different thing. They're trying to now. Apparently, they've read the Bhagavad Gita, or read about the Bhagavatam stories about the creation. So the scientific world is in darkness, and Prabhupada is shedding light on something that is so significant that it'll affect everybody in the world, and it has already. So as time marches on, the effect will be more far-reaching automatically. Krishna is opening up doors that were never there. So as the time progresses, Krishna has his plan. Prabhupada couldn't talk about it, but ultimately we all understood that Lord Chaitanya has a plan on how to get this knowledge and how the holy names will spread to every town and village. So it's going to happen. It's a matter of whether we do it or someone else does it, but when in our lifetime we'll see big changes. So I'll stop there. Any questions? Anybody, any Mayavadis here? I'm waiting for a Mayavadi. Okay, any last question? Anybody? Anything about stealing in the brahmacharya ashram? So be very careful, and just maintain a steadiness. And if you got a bank account, just get rid of it, man. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, go Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol.